Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know there's still quite a few folks out there grabbing drinks and food after the last main stage session. But I know there's a lot of breakout sessions to choose from, so thank you so much for being here in this room with me today. I'm maybe a little bit biased, but this is personally my favorite session of the summit. My name is Lily Hurd, and I am on the Capital Innovation and Engagement team at ReFed, and work primarily on our Food Waste Action Network, as well as our justice and equity work. I am very passionate about connecting folks who are working on justice and equity in the food waste space. So if you're in this room today hoping to connect with other folks who are doing this work, I'm your gal, as well as all the people in the room. But enough about me. This breakout session is all about bringing your voices to the forefront. So with that, I'll move us forward to the agenda for today. Before I do jump into the agenda, I want to ground some folks in the framework and definitions that ReFed uses as shorthand. So up here on the slide today, which is a little difficult to read, we use the acronym JEDI, so not Star Wars Jedi, but Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And we were introduced to this framework by Yuga Nakashima from Food Shift. She is unable to join us at the conference this year, but does some really, really excellent work and trainings in the JEDI space through her organization, and offers them to the food waste community. So I highly recommend checking them out if you haven't had a chance to explore them. J comes first because that's the ultimate goal of this work, is justice. Then is equity, because in order to achieve justice, you must have equity. And in order to achieve equity, you must have diverse representation of voices at the table informing decision-making. And last is inclusion. This is absolutely the bare minimum to any of these discussions. So I recognize that this is a very brief and superficial definition of that term, but I do want to move us on to the discussion today, but acknowledge that we could talk about the terminology and this framework for the entire session today. So here's our agenda for the day, and the majority of time will be spent on that middle section, and a fishbowl discussion relies heavily on the inclusion of voices in the audience today, so I hope you did not come here to be shy and sit silently. So be thinking of questions or topics that you'd like to pose to the group, or you'd like folks from the ReFed team to speak to. We're open to discussing anything here in this room today. So as you may or may not have known, ReFed will be releasing a landscape assessment report on the intersections of food waste and JEDI in late June. So you'll hear more about this report and its contents later on the main stage from ReFed's Executive Director, Dana Gunders. Because our discussion today is going to focus on a specific area, I do want to spend a few moments walking this group through some of the specifics for this area. But as you can see, we have 5 of these insight areas, and these are kind of the main themes that emerge throughout the process. So first, a high-level overview of the intersections that emerged as themes within this insight area. Undesirable working conditions for essential workers across the food system. Different pay structures, particularly in the agricultural sector, may create unintended consequences of increased food waste. And finally, a lack of representation in higher management and positions of power means fewer perspectives involved in strategy and decision-making. I would go so far as to venture that most people in this room are aware of some of these dynamics, which is great. But what are we going to do to create positive change and achieve this in the food system? We do have some visions for, and would again love to center this conversation today around these solutions. We asked people in the landscape assessment interviews what solutions they would like to see implemented or had heard about working in other industries or countries around the world. And some of those are listed on the screen now. I recognize that many of these solutions are not easy to implement and may have very large barriers like funding, unwillingness to deploy operational changes, fear of change, so on and so forth. And if these were easy fixes, we would have done them already. So I recognize that there are a lot of barriers in place to implementing these. However, we aren't going to make progress without having passionate and influential people, such as you folks in the room today, stepping up to discuss and move forward some of these solutions. So again, that's what we're here to do today. I am so grateful and excited to be joined by two incredible women to guide us in this discussion. Kashi Sehgal is based in Atlanta and is the founder and CEO of Rtaza, and I'll let her tell you a little bit more about her work. And Vanessa Mukhebi. Vanessa is a member of the communications team at ReFed and is based in Chicago, Illinois. They will share how this fishbowl-style discussion will work and then introduce a few of the prompts to get us started. And with that, I'll introduce them to the front.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Is
Can
this
we
on?
hear? Yes, it is. How are you all feeling? Good? Yeah. Do we want to take a little moment to just take a deep breath, get acclimated to each other? Really, the goal of this session is for Kashi and I really not to talk here. We really want this to be a participatory fishbowl discussion, and if you aren't familiar with that, I will get you up to speed. The idea is that at different moments, we encourage people to come up here and share an insight, whatever is resonating with you, whether it's a question you want to pose or it's a response to a question that we may pose or a learning that you might have. Please feel free. Like, this really is about all of us here, learning from each other, relearning, and unlearning. And if you aren't able to make it up on stage due to mobility issues or just simply don't want to, you are welcome to just raise your hands, and Lily will be able to give you a mic.
Yeah. Okay. So we have some. We'll do this. We have some community guidelines that are going to frame our discussion. We want to make sure that we are having a very inclusive, everybody is being heard discussion, but we want to make sure that we highlight a couple of things. First of all, this is a brave space today for everybody to share. No judgment on what you have to say, what your experience is, your thoughts, but we also want to make sure that you are talking about your own experiences and not speaking for others. And just assuming that you know what they're experiencing. So make sure that you're coming to this with an open heart. Please listen to each other. Engage with each other. Again, speak from your own lived experiences. And it goes without saying, but treat people in here how you would like to be treated, how you would like to be heard and listened to.
Yes, and I think another thing is we're all coming into this with different identities, different intersections, whether on gender, race, background, or whatever, other classification, and just being mindful of the powers that we each hold due to these identities. And with that, I will pass it on to Kashi to open up the discussion. But again, as we said, we really shouldn't be talking here. We really want to hear from you. But to kick us off, Kashi, can you share a little bit about the work that you're doing so that people can get to know you a bit better?
Sure. Mm-hmm. And I'll just also say that when you speak, first of all, we want you to come up here, but please obviously share your name, your pronouns, and maybe a little bit about what you do. But our intent is for nobody to be up here monologuing, especially us. So we want to keep everybody moving and chatting. Okay, so Kashi Sehgal. I started a company called Rtaza. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And we work in food waste and agriculture. So we're trying to bring dignity and all those things back to farmers and rural communities. In Georgia, we're based in Atlanta, but we work all over Georgia and soon all over the country. My experience has been that, what I'm learning is that farmers aren't paid fairly. I think we all know this. I'm new to the food system. I have a tech background, and saw that, we started during the pandemic, saw the lines of people lined up at food banks, cars and record numbers looking for help. And we saw this juxtaposed with people, farmers, throwing out food because they couldn't sell it to restaurants and whoever took the food and bought it from them. And my thought was, why can't we just have them meet up? There's so many issues around this that I had no concept of. I went on a listening tour around Georgia trying to figure out who was experiencing what. And I couldn't believe that there's no other industry that I know of where you can have a contract in place and it totally not matter. Like a farmer can have a purchase order or something and a delivery can just be refused. How is that possible? Like, how aren't people that have committed to buying that held accountable to actually purchase? It still doesn't make sense to me. And I don't know another industry that works that way. So I just felt like we had to step in and figure out a solution that helped really bridge that and eliminate that way of doing business. So we're just getting started. We haven't taken on the big brokers yet. But I really think there's a groundswell that we can create, at least in Georgia, to maybe shift policy and way things work. But we're starting at the business level. So from my perspective, I really hate how farmers are being treated. And it's just from a business perspective, not even from like a human dignity perspective. Like, we can get into all of those things, but man, that's just not the right way. So from what you've seen on the screen, from the solutions, do any of you have thoughts or reflections on equity, justice within the food system? Just initial thoughts that you'd like to share? Stakeholders around the food system? Erica? Come on up. Come on up. This is not scary.
Hi everyone, my name is Erica. I work with World Wildlife Fund on the food loss and waste projects that we focus on, that we have focused on the hospitality and food service sector. And along with that, I'm also working with Miami-Dade County to try to figure out their food loss and waste, their program that they're in the planning phase of. And so could you please repeat? I know I was ready to, like my brain started making connections, but could you please repeat what the question was?
Sure. So in terms of justice, equity around the food ecosystem, food value chain, when you're thinking about stakeholders, what are your reflections?
Right. Yes, and it's not only focused on in the farm scene, but just overall?
Overall, yeah,
Okay.
the whole food value chain.
Yeah, so I feel that, as you mentioned, that farmers are underpaid. I think also food service workers are really underpaid as well. And it's lovely to see that sometimes these employees are able to take this food home, but a lot of times they're not really considered when it comes to the disposal of food. And I think that when it comes to food service and the tourism sector, that there's a lot of disparity, there's a lot of inequities happening, especially, I want to say just especially in Miami. And a lot of work can be done to really just bridge the gap between all of the money that's getting funneled into the economy through the tourism industry and spreading out the access to fresh and clean and healthy food to the communities that are getting pushed out. And I haven't experienced it personally, but the way I've experienced it is working directly with the local urban farming communities and those experiencing food insecurity. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for one hand to wash the other, or one sector or a few sectors just to work together and really shine a light on things that are happening and create more equality in the way food is being distributed, just based on the food waste hierarchy. It's like first stop the food waste at the source, but then just feeding the hungry people, hungry animals, and then figure out what to do with it after. And I think that just the fact that there's so much food being wasted and there are so many mouths to feed, and we have enough food to feed all of these mouths, it's just not being managed in the way that we should be managing it.
Yeah, it's a resource management problem, right?
Hello.
You're on.
My name is Patience Kabwasa, and from Colorado Springs, Colorado. Organization is Food to Power. And when I think about the injustice in the food system, I think for me it's who has access to land and who doesn't, I think has always been foundational to wealth building in any economy, and whose labor is exploited and utilized to generate wealth for other folks, and how that shows up in health disparity in our bodies and diet-related disease, and literally is a life and death crisis.
Patience, I appreciate you sharing that, because so much of our focus is always on food, but there's so many aspects that, structural aspects that intersect. So we're talking about land, we're talking about health equity, and when Kashi previously was talking about farm workers, when we look at the fact that yes, this is a US food system, but we are largely dependent on immigrant workers, that's also another discrepancy. During the pandemic, for instance, just because of immigration issues, so many people not only lost their livelihood, but weren't able to come and, harvest foods, and yet, there's this punishment and reward system that we so often kind of ascribe to things where it's like, this isn't happening, but it's like there's far more that people are not aware of or don't see, that goes beyond just what is being reported out there. Yes, we want to ensure that all food is optimized, but if people aren't even able to have security of their jobs, be able to have proper health care, or be able to be nutritionally well equipped to be able to work, or just get proper wellness and well-being sorted out, then there's a much larger discussion that needs to be happening. And with that, for those who are just joining us, please come on up. So this is not for us to just stay here, so I'm gonna pass the mic. Yes.
Cool. Hi, y'all. Wow, thanks. Thanks for having me up. My name is Caitlin Harper. I use she, her pronouns. I am a researcher at Johns Hopkins University, and I work, half of my time is in the food security space and half of my time is in the food waste space. And I wanted to build off of what you were saying and what Vanessa was just saying about, I was reflecting on this, and I feel like I need to preface this by saying I have lots of partners who work in for-profit, right? I have friends who work in for-profit. I have family members that work in for-profit. And also thinking about the system and the structures that are causing the problems for both food security and food waste, they are largely caused by capitalism, right? And so I feel like when we're here at this conference and thinking about all the ways that businesses are doing innovative and amazing things, it sometimes feels like it takes over the conversation, or is the main conversation, whereas I feel like things that we are talking about in this room don't get talked about as much. And I wonder how we shift the narrative to start talking about more of those structural issues and thinking about capitalism and anti-capitalism and neoliberalism and how to address some of these issues. while not isolating our friends and our folks who work in for-profit and work in that world and in that space. So I don't have, sorry, that was a lot of word vomit for you all, but I'm curious about your all's thoughts and just like how you engage in this space and how we could start to shift that narrative.
It's all on? Hi, my name is Hayden Dansky. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I work with an organization called Boulder Food Rescue. And yeah, I did not know that this was a fishbowl, so I'm like, oh, I'll jump in and take the mic. After I saw patients get up here, I was like, crap. All right. So yeah, and I guess I just want to add to that. I also really appreciate that y'all are holding this space here and that this is a part of the conversation, because every other food waste conference I've been to in the past, I've always felt like this is what's lacking, and there's like a group of people outside talking about it, but it's never been it's never had its own mic'd room, right? So thank you all for doing that. And yeah, I guess so. We also operate in this space of like distributing food that would otherwise go to waste to communities living on a low income, right? And I've always felt that tension of, like, yes, they do have the same root causes of capitalism and white supremacy, right? But they have different tracks to get there. And like, if we want to, like, and sometimes I think we often to like simplify it by saying, oh, we're going to solve food waste and then automatically feed hungry people, right? And that's such an oversimplification of a really complex system that we're operating in. And if we want to look at, well, what do people really want and need in the communities, right? It's people want to have the ability to have choice and autonomy within their food system. They want to be able to buy the foods they want and need to feed their families, foods that feel nourishing to them, that are culturally relevant, that like are familiar, right? And that's health. It's not just produce. It's cultural health, it's community, it's having access to things that are nourishing to you as an individual. And to be able to do that, we have to talk about wages. I'm so glad that y'all are talking about like employment within the food system. And so how do we use this movement to also build this other movement of holding corporations accountable to pay their workers livable wages? We were just talking about an anti-hunger conference. Is it okay if I talk about this? We were just talking about an anti-hunger conference sponsored by Walmart and Feeding America. And like, there's this very clear, like they underpay workers, sign their, I'm picking on Walmart for a second, sign their workers up for food stamps, right? And then give money to a charitable food system to then distribute food to those people, right?
And then get a tax break for that.
And then get a tax break and look good, right?
And they also don't pay their employees livable wages.
And
so they're flipping money 3 ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it perpetuates the system of, like, charitable food system, and we operate in it, right? It's absolutely life-saving. Like, people need food to survive, and it's not free. It comes at a cost. It comes with a burden of like taking time off of work, going to stand in lines, filling out burdensome paperwork, risking like data privacy concerns, right? For immigrant populations, we were talking about that. Like, and it's a really hard system to navigate. And so it would be a lot more simpler if we could solve the food waste issue from a source reduction standpoint, use that money to invest in communities to build up their own systems that actually work for them and their communities, right? And I just feel like we have to, like, I don't know, integrate the complexity of all of these systems. And I just went on a rant, so I have no idea what.
No, it was great. I really like what you said about the 2 tracks to get there, because I feel like the bridge to those 2 tracks is healing the economic system. Until we really lift that up, we're not going to affect, I think, in a way that gets us out of this climate crisis, until we actually uplift the people whose bodies are literally on the altar of it.
Okay, one more thing, and I'll totally want to give up my seat here. There's one piece too to that point about like uplifting communities. What does it say? What are other I don't know, something that you all said or read, and something I've just been really delving into and interested in is worker cooperatives, right? And ways of like working within this, like it doesn't have to be for-profit, nonprofit, but what are other community-led solutions where people actually have shared decision-making power, where people can advocate for livable wages, where people have a stake in the foods that, and in their jobs and have like meaningful labor, right? And I don't know, I'm just like thinking about what are all these alternatives that we can be using our work to build relationships and build up communities so that people can actually have more of a say in the decisions that impact their lives. So I just want to throw that as a, also if anybody else knows about them, I'm nerding out and want to learn from you.
Come on up. Thank you for that. I'm also interested in what solutions, like how can business be a solution for what you just brought up? Does anybody have thoughts or ideas? How can they be part of the solution? Go ahead.
I can go. So I think a lot of what keeps coming to my mind, speaking from really what you had started talking about first, Kashi, about the farmers. And I really think it comes back to the people that are doing the work are experts, and I think that our systems that we have in place, particularly like reliant on capitalism, definitely don't use the people doing the work as experts. And so, and it came up in the main stage earlier where even like the packaging that's used to move product from farm to through the system. And I think like there's ways, like I'm sure there's so many humans out there that have these big ideas, right? But we're just not crowdsourcing and having those discussions. And we're reliant on, we're participating in, a corporate kind of function and system. And so like the mindset is almost needing to shift to allowing for some power to be taken back, kind of using that collective strategy of workers, right? Really being the experts in their fields, and even community members, right, that are facing food insecurity. I mean, they know how they would like these situations to be resolved, and to get food on their plates regularly and not having to go through that struggle day in and day out. So I think, I don't know, I just keep coming back to like, how do you shift and make changes from a systemic level, but really to kind of source and engage with the folks that are knee deep in the work? And how does that kind of rise to the corporate decision-making entities, and it's not just reliant on really top-down. So that's kind of what came to my mind.
Hi everyone, my name is Uzo. I'm from Nigeria, and so I have a developing country or developing nation perspective to the issues of justice. I'm so sorry.
We didn't say that.
I'm so sorry, guys. Yeah, so I have a developing country perspective to the issues around equity. I came to this conference to learn, so it's more like I'm trying to talk about equity from a developing country perspective to know what everybody thinks about whether it's applicable here in the US. So in the food systems where I work, because, okay, I build cold supply chains. Basically, I connect food producers from harvest to the point of retail. So my focus is food loss. Now, where I work, we do not really have much workers. Everybody's an entrepreneur. So we have small-scale food producers, and everybody is his own boss. But they still practice more agriculture from a perspective of subsistence and something they do for survival. And the two issues of equity we have is, one, there is a significant income disparity. There's a significant disparity between how much the farmers earn and how much the consumers pay. So a farmer may sell food that he harvested for like $2, but it gets to the consumer at $10 to $16, and most of the money, most of the revenues is gotten by multiple middlemen who add no value because we have a fragmented supply chain. Yeah, I've been made to understand that here in the US, the supply chains are a lot more centralized, but I also hear that there's a lot of discussions around regional food systems as opposed to centralized food systems. So I want to know if there's anybody here who works around regional food systems, and is there any form of fragmentation? Is there disparity between the incomes generated by the producer and the consumer? Then I also want to ask questions around inclusion of small-scale producers in US food systems. I'm still learning. I've been in the US for 48 hours, so I may not. You guys know the system better than me. But for instance, I came in through California, and I saw a small farmers market where I saw lots of small-scale sellers of fresh produce, similar to what I see in Nigeria. I don't know whether that's prevalent here, and is there inclusion for those small farmers who, let's say, produce one ton of, let's say, tomatoes every 3 months, and so them being able to form part of the food system, because I know there's a huge demand for organic, because I know those guys, at least where I come from, those guys practice agriculture for survival. They usually do not make any money. And that's basically why I started building micro-level aggregation centers in Nigeria, where I aggregate all those guys together so they can now form the volumes that can be useful in the global food system. So I just want to know what everybody thinks. I'm more from a learning perspective. Thank you.
Well, Uzo, I do kind of want to make a connection between what you said now and even what our keynote speaker, Rosa, spoke about. When we're looking at the global south, we're focusing more on food loss. When you think about the more west, we're looking at food waste. And despite that fragmentization, it really is an interconnected system, because food that is produced across Africa, so I'm originally from Kenya, part Nigerian as well, and we are the breadbasket of the world, but food that is exported that doesn't meet exportation demands, which are ridiculously insane. If you think the ugly fruit here is an issue, it is 10 times worse for small-scale farmers. And it's just like whatever we're not accepting here has detrimental impact. So that's a whole discussion that's not even happening. But I would want to sort of shift our focus on looking at what are possible solutions that we can be implementing. The problems are myriad. There's a plethora of them and everything, but what is actionable, what is viable, what are you doing, what are you seeing that other people are doing that can happen? And one thing I will say is I'm so glad that we're all here today, and we are 1, 2, 3 people, we are a megaphone. But we can only shout so much if the top, it has to be a top-down approach as far as really, really moving that needle. And so where are our advocates? Those need to be in leadership. Where is better representation happening there? So this trickles down. It shouldn't just be, the manager, the frontline worker, the food rescuer who's a volunteer, the farmer, the cashier register. Where are we seeing people in positions of power who are truly using that and advocating for more belonging and more inclusion of whether it's diverse voices, diverse human beings, and more implementation of equitable initiatives. And with that, I will pass the mic again.
Okay, so I am Allie Manning from Memphis, Tennessee. Has anybody been in Memphis before? Good. So I am a food scientist, a consultant, author, and educator. And so I work with an organization called Clean Memphis. Janet Boscarino is our executive director. And so I support food sustainability when it relates to restaurants. And so because of my experience in food education, food science, and consulting in sustainability, I'm able to see quite a large landscape of individuals who are still not aware of the work that we're doing. Still don't even know what composting means. And I am from Alabama, so I'm from the South, and I understand a lot of what's happening down there. And so for me, if we're not talking about it at every level, even with the little ones, what are we doing? In what spaces are we disrupting? In what spaces are we asking those tough questions? And really advocating for the work that we're doing beyond just in our friend groups or the people who are already familiar with this work. And so in the food industry, I've experienced a lot of waste. Even my work as a food scientist, studies, we would have to literally throw McDonald's, for example, we would have to throw fries away, throw hash browns away, and it has to deal with policy as well. How are we implementing these policies that are going to prevent that from happening? And so I think if we can begin to have those discussions beyond our friend groups, beyond our communities that we frequent, and start talking to the folks in the spaces that have the ability to make the most change in our neighborhoods and states, that's how it's going to move this needle forward and make some changes.
I just wanted to go ahead and answer. Could you please remind me what your name?
Uzo is fine.
Uzo? Yeah, so I wanted to go ahead and address your question because I see some really cool stuff happening in South Florida and in Miami. There's a gentleman named Art. He's actually from St. Louis, which is really a funny coincidence, and he founded an organization called Urban Oasis, which hosts farmers markets in a couple of different places in Miami. And I don't know the official name of the program that doubles SNAP or EBT. What was it called? Fresh for Less. So it's a program that doubles SNAP or EBT benefits that farmers markets can use to provide fresh and healthier produce to low-income families. And so he has a lot of things going on, and the great thing about it is Urban Oasis is an actual farmers market that sources local produce. And so in Miami, there's an area called Homestead, the Redlands, and they have a lot of agriculture activity going on. And so most of the stuff in that market, I would say 95% of the stuff in the market is sourced either from Miami or Central or even, I think, Northern Florida. And so I think that touches a little bit on the regional aspect of what you were asking for. And then also even urban, what's the name now? The Green Haven Project in Miami as well. They have a few different, they keep building new farms every, I would say maybe like every 6 months or so in food deserts, which are places where I think fresh produce is, I think the closest grocery store that provides fresh produce is about a mile away. And so they have a lot of farms. They have different grow spaces that provide free food to those who live in that area. So they're just growing as much as they can and providing free bags of groceries to these communities, and also as well as dried goods or toiletries and things for free. They receive donations and they also grow it. So I think those are some really cool things that are happening. And as Hayden said, just food waste, it's like, why are we giving excess food to these communities? I actually spoke with someone at a Climate Ideas conference, and she works with clinicians for climate action. And she was saying that she works with low-income communities, and she's saying, well, the food that you guys are rescuing is giving my patients high cholesterol because the stuff that's being wasted is like really cholesterol high mac and cheese or like leftover like steaks and burgers and things like that. And so I think it also goes to the food that's subsidized, like the rice, the corn, and things like that. We need to provide more. Well, I would love to hear any other solutions that have to do with making sure that fresh food and healthy, nutrient-dense food is being provided while, like as Hayden mentioned, food is being reduced at the source.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jade Clark. I am from Memphis, Tennessee. I currently work for a nonprofit ag tech company, and we are farmer focused. So I love the conversation about the farmers. I did want to kind of piggyback on two comments made earlier. So in terms of regional food systems, I feel like all of the regions in the U.S. are very, very different in terms of the complexity of their food system, how advanced they are in legislation and policies. I never wanted to get involved in politics, but that is where most of these things live. You know, a lot of the policies and legislation are in place to protect, you know, the larger companies. I also am a food scientist by background, so I've worked for all of the big food companies, Nestle, Coke, Tyson. I've worked for them all, and I realized that there are so many protections in place for these companies, for those larger stakeholders, the wealthy individuals. I feel like we need to shift who we're protecting, because a lot of the policies are in place. You can't donate food because people don't want to be liable, right? It's a liability. So how do you think about challenging, you know, the status quo in the way that we do things? Agriculture, I've been in agriculture for my whole entire career. It's embedded with, this is the way we've always done things. And there is a time, COVID broke down, it dismantled our food systems in a way that we are now able to repair it and think about how we do this creatively. And like, you know, you said, get the people that are impacted by this involved. So I work with youth. Like Allie mentioned, you gotta talk to the youth about this and get them to, we have challenge sessions. I've hosted challenge events where we're getting youth to develop and think about, brainstorm ideas, how they can become business solutions, whether they're technologies or services, products, things like that, where they are in control and they're coming up with ideas that are really, I mean, they're the most impacted. Most of my studies, like I said, my background is in food science, but I learned a lot from my grandmother who had 7 kids and was trying to figure out how to feed them and living in poverty. So making your food, your meals stretch, being creative, like we need to go to those experts, to those people that are like really impacted by food insecurity. Everybody thinks they have ideas. That's one of the good things that I like about my organization, Ag Launch, is that we work with startups. We have an accelerator program, and we got all these startups and folks coming to us, and they're like, oh, help us get our product, our technology to market, and they had never even been on a farm before. So it's, how do you have a farmer or a farm solution and you don't even know what the needs are, what the challenges that these farmers are facing? So I think the solution is more around getting involved in hearing the voices and getting getting feedback from those that are really suffering from this, and also tapping into our youth. They have a lot of ideas. They're seeing this. They know how to reach other youth. So I feel like we need to, you know, lean into them and their solutions more as well. Any other? Yeah. I don't know what else to say in terms of like the farmers. I know that it is a big issue, but I feel like the challenges that the farmers face is different across the country. Farmers markets are a solution, but there are several farmers who can't even get into a farmers market. They don't have the capacity. So I think we need to think about those type of things, and I think a lot of times our solution is always, let's educate, let's provide some technical assistance. When you go to these farmers and these business owners, they're like, I don't need another class. Like, I don't want to go through another training. I've done that. I've been through this. I've heard several people tell me why I am incompetent or why I can't figure this out. But I really just need someone to help me build my capacity, like to be able to do some of these things. We have ideas. How do I implement them if I don't have any type of support? So I think that's where we need to just kind of shift focus a little bit in terms of who we're engaging and thinking about those. It's not a one-stop shop or a one solution that's going to solve everything. So their capacity workforce. A lot of farmers are one. They're one person, a one-man team. So they can't go to markets every Saturday and stand there and sell their produce, and nobody's at the farm harvesting and things like that. We had several farmers who they didn't have the people to even harvest their products, so they just had to till it back into the ground. So thinking about like labor is a huge issue. There are people, I mean, not getting paid a livable wage is a real thing, but there's, I mean, so many farmers just can't do it. They can't pay a livable wage. They don't have access to markets. They don't have access to capital, and that is a huge barrier to them, you know, competing against these large companies and competitors and big farmers.
Hi, I'm Letitia Steele. I'm with Denver Food Rescue. We have like the Colorado Collaborative in the room. I'm actually from the Appalachian Mountains coal mining region of West Virginia and Virginia, and I did grow up on like the commodity boxes and things like that, and going to the church to get your box of whatever is being sent. When I think about this system, I think about just really like being in school, being in elementary school, being in high school, and the stigmas that are really placed on youth. You have, when I was in high school, these great horticulture programs and things like that, but if you are the student and you are taking these classes, you're really looked down upon as opposed to the students who are on the college track. So I really believe that solving a lot of these inequities and really thinking about JEDI work and really improving the food system starts really at that root level with how we change the perception of food producers, of food workers, and even how we're seeing food in books. From the moment we're all learning how to read, we're seeing what a banana looks like, what an apple looks like, what a tomato looks like as you're learning the alphabet in whatever language that you are speaking. Those images also need to change. You shouldn't be having to go to the grocery store to find this perfect tomato that is just like how you've been trained that it's supposed to look like. So I do think that it goes at a bit deeper of a level, that we can do a lot of the work with what we're doing now and teach our friends, our family, our youth about what composting looks like, how we can change the concept of food, but it really starts at a much more fundamental level.
I also think that the work that I do with Project Green Fork and engaging restaurants post-pandemic has really been challenging. You know, we all had those takeout boxes and we were so sick of styrofoam, you know, but what is the solution to that? And how do we engage the wing spots in Memphis? We probably have, how many, Jay? 500, you know, that are still using styrofoam. How do you engage these Black-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, women-led businesses, and convince them that they need to purchase biodegradable, compostable materials when they are just trying to meet the bottom line? And so we have about 50 or so restaurants that are Project Green Fork certified, so they've gone through the 6 steps of sustainability. So they're composting, they have a food waste plan, they're recycling, but how do you also engage those other restaurants that aren't as niche and be able to bring those resources and opportunities to them and say, hey, you can do this too. So that's another challenge on my part with restaurants.
I just want to add too, I think like subsidies and incentivizing things, you know, like we have a lot of subsidies in agriculture and our food system, but like even restructuring what those subsidies look like and who they're really operating for and if they're really working or not. And I know that those are really big policy questions, but certainly things that we as individuals and then collective individuals can make known to our representatives. And I think, I don't know, I'm just really inspired by a lot of the talk has been about also like talking within your own networks. And I know personally I just struggle with that sometimes, not wanting to push a topic from, you know, my own stance or, and just to be sensitive. But I think speaking about like engaging with restaurants, especially back on that, thinking about like, you know, well, it's not just maybe environmental or climate, it's not just about like food waste, but how can you make it a business operations tweak so that people that are really just trying to survive, it makes sense for them to take on, and really kind of scale from there. And I'm going to give this up now.
My name is Michael Watson. I'm from Kansas City, just up the road. I'm the executive director of actually two nonprofits, one called After the Harvest, who deals with food waste from farms. We send people and organizations to farms to actually glean from the farm the food that would probably go to waste. I'm also executive director of an organization called REEV, which deals with utility assistance and food pantry assistance. And so I get a chance to see from the farm kind of to the table the impact of the food system that it has. One of the things that we've come across is just the inability to get the food to the table in time before it quote unquote spoils. I like the young lady who talked about just the concept of how food looks and how that is the determining factor of what actually gets to the table. And so after the harvest, when we send teams out to glean, we're transporting that food directly to our local food bank in the Midwest, well, in Kansas City, to get that fresh produce out. And so I think one of the things that also goes that isn't talked about, well, a little bit here today, is that fresh produce, the lack of fresh produce that is ultimately making our people sick, and high blood pressure, cholesterol, those things of that nature, from dealing from a food pantry standpoint, those things that are shelved versus the ability to access fresh produce. And so one of the things that we talk about is how do we partner, or we need to talk about is how do we partner on that logistics piece to get it from the farm to the table or to the pantries to get it to the people who actually need it. And so working on the other end of the spectrum with the people who need utility assistance, new food pantry assistance, these aren't people who are necessarily homeless or kind of destitute. These people who are working, going to work every single day. And I heard the person talk about taking away from their time to actually go and get into the line to get that food and to get those things that they actually need. And so from my perspective is how do we solve the logistics standpoint of getting that food that the farmers want. We deal with a lot of, in Kansas and Missouri, big ag. And so we try to deal with the smaller farmers as well, the Mennonite farmers, the Amish farmers, who they don't deal with any electricity, so their carbon footprint is nothing, essentially. And so we deal with them to help them pay just the packaging of that grade B produce that will ultimately go to waste. Hey, we'll pay you, so therefore we're not taking away from the farmers, but we'll pay you for that packaging. We'll send trucks down to get it to the people who may need it. But again, it's just the logistics standpoint of how to get that fresh produce from the farms to the families who need it in a timely manner.
I just wanted to add one quick thing, and then I'm going to give the mic up about the incentivizing. I feel like there needs to be a shift too in who we incentivize. I think we mentioned Walmart; they get 3 times the benefit, right? What if we shifted that to incentivizing students, right? I had a student come up with an idea. It's like, hey, what if we have teams where we just go, within our community and we compost and we calculate how many pounds of food that we're actually saving and recovering, and then maybe we can get groceries or something like that from Kroger so that we can help feed families. And this all came from an 8th grader, so this was just an amazing idea, but just thinking about how we do that, I go through this a lot. We're trying to encourage more students to get involved in agriculture. And if we're showing them something different, and if all they see is community farms, community gardens that are being maintained by the community with not, getting any type of economic benefit really, and they see farmers struggling, how can we encourage them or make them want to participate or be a farmer? I know for blacks, black farmers we will be extinct soon. We're the only group that's declining. And how do you get a student, when they see that they can be an influencer or they can, do something from their home, very little, labor involved, and get a huge payout? We can't encourage our kids or want them to participate if we don't have something to grab their attention, some kind of gateway. And I feel like incentivizing is definitely a way, but also making them aware of the economic benefit and opportunities that are related to food and agriculture. So that's all I want to say.
Love that. Okay, I think we have time for 2 more comments before we wrap up.
Awesome. Hey everyone, my name is Jules. Basically, my organization is working on funding food banks, gleaners, just all food recovery organizations based on the amount of methane that they're preventing, and hopefully using those funds to help pay wages as well as a host of other costs. I guess my big question for everyone here, for the panelists, is with this kind of supporting these food banks, like a lot of people here have been saying, there's deep structural problems currently in who's getting paid in the food system, who's getting paid in food rescue. So I guess my question is, how can we encourage diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, instead of kind of just perpetuating the current pay system that's happening throughout the food recovery space? And I'd love to kind of hear thoughts or ideas on that. But yeah, thank you, everyone.
I mean, Jules has heard a lot from me, so I won't answer that question directly right now, but I'm Sophia, by the way. I'm from the FarmLink Project, so if you came and saw our film yesterday, Abundance, that's us, and thank you for coming if you're able to make it. I lead our policy and advocacy efforts at FarmLink, so we connect along a lot of points in the supply chain, so a lot to unpack and a lot to figure out where we're prioritizing our work and our advocacy. And something we come back to, I think has been illuminated through everyone who's joined us up here, is it's going to take a shift in social perspective, and social norm is really going to be the number one thing we're going to need to see and say. And I'll say it, even coming from a group that's seen as a hunger fighting charity in this space, is charity and philanthropy is distracting from the root causes of hunger. And that's a huge thing we're going to need to look at. And I know we're at a Food Waste Solutions Summit, but that directly connects with what access looks like in America right now. And I think there's, in the nonprofit space right now, there's a lot of organizations seen as systems change organizations, and then those that are doing the work on the ground and measuring their impact by pounds of food moved, et cetera. And the more we can connect those organizations together and those people together is, I think, where that shift in social perspective is going to happen. And I really hope that we are able to create more spaces like this, because it's a privilege for us all to be thinking about this. And I think if we can create more spaces for the people who should have that privilege that we all have today to think about these issues and share their ideas and solutions, that's really where the change is going to happen. And we're working on that at FarmLink, and I'd love to talk more about how we can all work on that together.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. So Lily's going to close us out with some thoughts.
Okay, I have 3 things, and then I promise I will let you get to lunch. One is just thank you so much. I realized that not everyone came into this room knowing that it was a fishbowl, and so being able to just kind of pivot and involve your own voice and really be here, engage with one another is really, really special. So sincerely, thank you to every single one of you. 2, the reason why this kind of discussion was focused around the intersections and potential solutions is that I'm hoping for ReFed to potentially make a working group around this, and whether it's advancing some solutions forward with an actual project deliverable or policy and advocacy. I know that there are roles and topics that everyone in this room can play. So I'm gonna have Vanessa in the back of the room just with a couple sign-up sheets just so we can all stay in touch. So if you want to be more involved, and again, I'm not sure entirely what shape this is going to take, but if you want to be involved in that conversation, please do leave your contact information. And then last of all is just a couple logistic reminders. Next up is lunch, and then directly following lunch is the structured networking session. So they said it on the main stage, but the letter on the back of your badge is the room that you have been assigned to. So make sure that that is the room that you go to directly following lunch. All right, thank you so much, everyone.